Hello, I'm Lou Goldstein, and welcome to another edition of Focus On. Tonight we continue our conversation with Beth Stapleton about suicide education and suicide prevention. In part one, we talked about signs to look for and how to talk to people who may be suicidal. And in this section today, we're going to talk about how one can get help for someone who may be suicidal, and talk about the resources and what help is available, and have a lot of information that you can pass on to friends, neighbors, or family. So Beth, thank you very much for continuing this conversation in part two of our series. We know there's a lot of special events that are coming up that we'll talk a little bit about again, just to remind people, in November. And just a little bit more about Beth in case you missed part of part one. Beth has lived in Cranford for 35 years with her husband Tom. They have raised 3 children, and both are currently retired now, and they've been retired for 6 years. Their 3 children are Liz, who is 32, Matt, 27, and Brian, who died by suicide at the age of 21. And after losing Brian to suicide, Beth became increasingly involved with AFSP, initially participating in walks, advocating for public policy, supporting newly bereaved survivors of suicide loss, and preventive education. She is currently the volunteer coordinator and board member for the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention's New Jersey chapter. So let's continue our talk and talk about how we can get help for those who need help and who need resources, and what they can do, and hopefully realize that it's not a lost situation. So before we get started, though, I'd like to ask you, just as someone who lives in Cranford and who knows you, if you could tell everyone who was Brian, and tell us a little about your son, because sometimes that often goes, passes by, and we really need to know about your son and who he was.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think very often suicide loss survivors feel like their loved one, it becomes all about how they died instead of who they were. So I really do genuinely appreciate your asking about Brian. So I mean, Brian was smart and funny and kind, very sarcastic though, and also loved a good argument. So you always had to be on your toes with him. He was also really the most social of our family. Yeah. I mean, he would go crazy if he was inside for too long, and he did not understand that the rest of us, the other 4 of us, were kind of homebodies and didn't always have to be going and hanging out with friends and constantly on the move. As a baby, I called him my sunshine because he always had a bright big smile on his face whenever I saw him. And he was also, even as a young kid, he was always the one who was making the goofy face in the photograph, or photobombing, family pictures and things like that. So, he loved being around people, and he had a real curiosity about people. And I think that's what allowed him to connect with people so easily. He just, I would hear him talking to people, even his brother, when his brother graduated from basic training. I heard him on the phone, and it wasn't just how'd it go, is everything okay? It was like a genuine curiosity. So, I think that's how Brian connected well with people. And, he kept friends, for his entire life. He had friends from Cranford that he had gone to nursery school with. He had friends, throughout high school. He had his, freshman dorm mates, were people who he maintained friendships with. Right. And he had a huge group of friends in the fraternity that he belonged to. So, he connected with lots of people. I mean, one thing, after he passed away and the days afterwards, we had several people tell us that Brian was their best friend. And that was, kids from town or fraternity brothers. So he really did know how to connect with people. And they also told us that he was the one that they would talk to, when they were struggling. So most of them had no idea that he was struggling as well.
Well, it sounds like he was a very outgoing guy, and a lot of things probably, kept a lot of things to himself too. And I know that's always hard to pick up. I know probably I can only imagine what you went through, what the family went through. But also for those, do you find that yourself after this happened, you kept looking back and looking for those signs and
Oh,
seeing,
absolutely.
you know, did I miss something, or what could I have done, or, you know. I know it's a raw question to ask you.
Oh, absolutely, but we all do that, and
right.
I think I looked at all of those last conversations. I mean, you know, Brian died the day after he graduated from college. We'd spent that day with him, so, you know, seeing him in his graduation ceremony, taking pictures, having lunch, you know, packing up his stuff. I mean, we looked at every single, you know, conversation, comment, you know, trying to see what did we miss that day. You know, you do go back and look, and there are signs when you go back. They're not obvious signs when you're in the moment.
Right.
You know, and for us, we knew he was struggling at the time, but we thought, all right, we'll get him home. You know, we'll get him home, and, you know, we'll get him to go talk to someone, you know, a therapist again, because he had gone into therapy and was taking medication when he was a sophomore for a few months.
Okay.
And it worked well for him. But he also didn't want his friends to know that. And, you know, so he didn't really continue it when he went back to school, but he seemed fine. And he was fine. He probably wasn't fine.
Right.
On the surface, he seemed fine, but he managed to, you know, complete all his classes. You know, he graduated with good grades and on time. You know, so, I mean, he seemed to be fine on the surface. Now, looking back, you know, in hindsight with what I know now, I would have had very different conversations with him at the time. And, you know, suicide loss survivors are always going to ask why, and they're always going to, you know, look for what they missed.
Right.
You know, and kind of blame themselves for not seeing it and not saving their loved one, you know.
You said something very interesting. Sophomore year, he was taking medication, you know, to help, but he didn't want his friends to know.
Yeah.
Do you think that was because he thought that if they did know, they would think less of him in any way?
I just think it's the whole stigma around mental health. I think, yes, I think he would have thought that they'd think less of him, and I don't believe that's true. I mean, having gone and talked to his fraternity brothers, they actually did a memorial service for him months after he died, and you know, we talked to many of them, and you know, a lot of them said that they struggled as well, but they hadn't talked about it. Right. And even some of his high school friends, you know, would stop by either on the anniversary or, you know, near Brian's birthday and talk to us. And, you know, they made a promise, you know, to each other and to us that they would talk about it if they were struggling. So that meant a great deal to us to hear, that they at least learned that, you know, from losing Brian, that you've got to talk about this.
You do. And you have to overcome the stigma that society has placed on the issues of mental health.
Yes.
Because only if we do talk about it and get others to talk about it, you know, do we actually get healthy. Yes.
There's something about not talking about it and hiding it and pretending you're okay that I think powers this feeling, you know, the suicidal thoughts. I think it makes it worse. I think when you talk about it, it kind of relieves some of that pressure.
Right.
So.
Well, everybody has to find that comfort zone, I guess.
Yes.
And the right people to talk with about it. Now, I know that there is a hotline, a suicide hotline in New Jersey, 988, that was launched in the summer of 2022. You know, why is it important to have the 988 hotline?
Well, the 988, as you said, launched in July. Actually, you know, it's important that it be a 3-digit number, excuse me, because it's easy to remember. You know, there used to be an 11-digit number, and every training class that I would do, we would say, take out your phone and put this number in so you would have it, right? Because people are not going to remember the 11.
It's like 411 or 911, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think first and foremost, you increase access, right, when you make it an easy to remember number. And we do know that the calls to 988 have gone up by about 45% since its launch in July. But also what's important to know about 988 is it's not just about the phone number. 988 really is about taking that first step in beginning the process to fix a very broken mental health system. So it begins with the phone number, but it really is much more than that. You know, it includes, you know, the goal is to use federal funds and grants, you know, to, again, fix this very broken system, to provide full resources to people who are struggling.
Okay.
And those resources are, they fall into these 3 different categories of someone to call,
Okay.
someone to respond, and somewhere to go.
Okay, so maybe we can break those 3 categories down and talk about the resources that the state's looking to put into place to support those who may be struggling. So, in those 3 categories, could you break it out a little, Beth, to basically so that people understand, what it means as far as someone to call or someone to respond to or somewhere to go? Maybe we can start with just, someone to call.
Okay, so someone to call is 988. Again, it's a much easier number to remember than the previous 11-digit number. You can call, you can text, or you can chat online, and you will have a Lifeline responder who is at a call center near you. So there are 5 call centers across New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And this is important because when you call this number, it's important that the person that you speak to understand what resources are available in your community. So having these call centers across New Jersey and having them be routed to New Jersey first, if you're calling from within the state, is really critical, I think, for that reason. Because if someone is answering the phone from California, they're not going to necessarily know what's available in Mercer County, in terms of help for you. But if somebody local answers the phone, they can. The other thing that's important to know is that New Jersey actually has set up screening centers for every county in our state. So that 24/7, if someone's in a suicidal crisis, you call that 988 number, they will connect you with this screening center. That's a mental health screening center that will determine, how high a risk you are at that point and what next steps need to be taken.
Okay.
One of the interesting things about 988 is it's a relatively small number of the calls, a small percent of the calls that actually go on to, result in a crisis response. A good portion of them is just, that Lifeline responder just talking someone through maybe how to have a conversation with someone or talking to someone about resources that are available to them, but not necessarily a crisis response.
Okay. I think we want to go through research too. A lot of times we get informed by, I know AFSP, basically puts out, funds certain research, and the research is done and gives us some answers, or at least gives us a direction to go in. And I just wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about what we've learned through research that has informed the plans for 988 and beyond.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that we have learned from research about a person when they're in a suicidal crisis that I think it does inform these kinds of programs. So that one thing that is that a suicidal crisis is something that comes on very intensely and very quickly, and it can also dissipate just as quickly. And that suicidal crisis typically for a person could last maybe minutes to hours. So, again, people are not walking around feeling that they have to die immediately, right? These feelings come on them, in a crisis, but then they can dissipate. Now, if you know that somebody is in a suicidal crisis and is talking about ending their life, you should obviously not leave them alone unless you feel you're at risk as well.
Right.
So if you feel any risk to yourself, you should leave the person and call 911 immediately. But if you don't feel at risk by being with that person and staying with them and supporting them, you should if they're in that immediate crisis.
Okay.
The other interesting thing that we've learned about people who are suicidal is once they've decided the method that they plan to use to end their lives, they don't typically change. So if, for example, someone has decided that they're going to end their life by taking prescription pills, and you take them away so they no longer have access to those drugs, they won't just turn immediately and use another method.
Right.
So that's very interesting, and I think that helps us in terms of helping people, right? So again, 988 and the way that it's been set up, the intention is to put time and distance between the person who is in that suicidal crisis and the means that they have in their mind to end their lives.
Right.
So it does begin with someone to call. But the goal is to have someone to call, someone to respond, and then somewhere to go as well. So someone to respond in New Jersey, we have actually in 12 out of 21 of our counties, there are mobile response units today who can respond if somebody has a crisis, is having a mental health crisis.
Okay.
The goal obviously is to have that in all 21 counties, so that, if someone has a mental health crisis and you don't need to have a police response, to have a mental health response, right? To have a trained mental health practitioner respond. So again, that exists in 12 out of 21 of our counties, but that part of the buildup of 988 is to have those in every county. And then finally somewhere to go. So the Division of Mental Health and Addiction Services is working on developing what they call crisis receiving and stabilization centers, which it's just
What was that?
I
What does that mean?
I know. It's not a great name, but if you think just urgent care,
Stabilization Center, yeah.
urgent care for mental health.
Okay.
Okay, so they're kind of walk-in centers where if somebody, if you're sitting with someone and you're thinking, all right, they're in a mental health crisis, I need to get them help right now. I need to get them to talk to somebody right now. You can take them to one of these urgent care facilities.
So it's like a mental health emergent care center.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's an alternative to emergency rooms because not all emergency rooms, are prepared for the mental health crises, or they're prepared for it, but they don't necessarily have enough resources or beds for people to go to. So if you can go to one of these urgent care facilities, the intent is to have them staffed with professional clinicians, but also with people with lived experience. So when we say lived experience, that's someone who has had a past, a suicide attempt or suicidal ideation, but is in a good place, in their healing, and is someone who can help. So if someone comes into one of these facilities, they can, based on their own experience and having been there, talk to a person about what they can expect and how they can get help and what some of their next steps would be. So right now in 5 counties in New Jersey, so Bergen County, Ocean, Camden, Cumberland, and Salem County, there are urgent care facilities that people can go to.
Is there plans, you mentioned it, apart from fiscal issues, what's preventing the other counties from?
Well, that's part of this whole buildup with 988, right? Is to build that full system of care and to have all 3, someone to call, someone to respond, and somewhere to go, available in every county across the state. So that is the goal.
I know you touched a little bit about this, but I just want to go back to it, about what types of treatment are available for someone who has suicidal thoughts.
Yeah, treatment for someone with suicidal thoughts typically includes psychotherapy, some sort of talk therapy, and or medication. And I think, it's generally a combination of those things. But I would say one of the most important things is for people to find a clinician. So that could be a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a therapist, but to find somebody that they're comfortable with and they trust.
Right.
I've often heard, and this is true for grief therapy, I went through it myself, when you're looking for a therapist, it typically takes, 3 people at least to find someone that you connect with. So I think if someone's looking for someone, a person to talk to, a clinician, I think you have to expect that you're not going to necessarily love and connect with the first person. That it may take a couple people before you find that comfort and trust. But I think that that's one of the most important things.
Okay. We like to talk about self-care, and what everyone can do who's watching, each one of us. What can we do to improve our own mental well-being? So,
I was very fortunate to have seen Zach Williams, who is the son of the late Robin Williams, speak at a lost survivors conference a couple months ago. And he is a suicide prevention advocate. And it was interesting because he talked about mental hygiene. And I really love this terminology because we often talk about self-care. But I think for some reason when you talk about self-care, people feel like that's selfish, right? I'm taking time for myself. But if you term it as mental hygiene, then it becomes something that you have to do, right? Just like brushing your teeth or washing your face, right? And we should each of us every day do something for our own mental well-being. So it's not something that you do when you find time or, when you're not busy, with your family or with your job. And it can be 5 minutes, or it can be longer than that. But I would encourage everyone to find time every single day to do something for their own mental well-being. Couple examples of things that you can do is practice gratitude. I know, and it is practice. It's like, every day, get up and either write in a gratitude journal or just think about, 5 things that you're grateful for that day. If you start your day like that every day, it becomes part of who you are, and you start to feel more grateful. Other people get involved in physical activities, so it could be walking, hiking, bike riding, walking, and things like that, cycling. So lots of different physical activities are often very good for your mental health.
Okay.
Meditation and mindfulness. They've actually found that for people with suicidal thoughts, in addition to different therapies, meditation and mindfulness and yoga actually are very helpful, because in those practices, it's very much about, focusing on your breathing, seeing your thoughts, but not necessarily responding to them. So when you think about someone who's got suicidal thoughts, being able to kind of manage those thoughts through yoga and meditation is one way that helps. I'm not saying that's the only thing that helps. There's clearly therapies that, that you can do and get involved in with that. But they found that to be a great practice for people who are struggling. Other people like creative things. They get involved in different art or crocheting or, different creative activities. So I think key is to find what works for you, and what makes you feel good and what gives you kind of some peace. I think everyone should do that. As I said, every single day you should find a little bit of time to do some sort of mental hygiene.
But we always find excuses, right? We're too busy, et cetera, to do that. And I think that's a built-in that mechanism that we avoid sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, even taking time to do some deep breathing exercises, that literally takes less than a few minutes. But if you do that every day, it's something that, again, can help you manage your stress and anxiety and can give you some peace. Okay.
Now, I know you have some AFSP events coming up, and maybe we can touch on that for everybody who may want to, go to them.
Absolutely. So I think the key event that we have coming up in November is what we call our International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day. Suicide loss survivors very often have a really difficult time in the holidays. The holidays can be very tough, especially if you're newly bereaved.
Right.
So we actually take, the Saturday before Thanksgiving every year, and sort of set that aside for suicide loss survivors. And we have events across the country, but in New Jersey we have 6 events across the state that people can go to. And what we'll do, we provide information, we do activities, there's a documentary film that always has a message of kind of hope and healing that we provide, and then breakout groups that I think in some ways the breakout groups are intended to help especially newly bereaved people understand what a support group might feel like going to if they've never been to a support group. But we have breakout groups where we encourage people to connect and talk to other loss survivors. I think, when we talk to suicide loss survivors and ask them what's helped them heal the most, very often, support groups and therapy are the 2 things. So connecting with other loss survivors, and some sort of individual therapy are the things that help people heal the most. So this Survivor Day, we try to connect people and help them along that healing path.
What helped your children to survive after,
So, it's very interesting with kids because, everybody grieves differently and everybody heals differently. And certainly my experience in our support group, I've learned that kids don't often like to talk to their parents about what they're going through because they've already seen them go through such intense pain that they don't want to add to that.
Okay.
And I also think they just grieve differently because the relationship was different. I can tell you my son really did not talk about losing Brian much for a while. And, I would often encourage both to talk to someone, get help if you need it. I'll try to find a grief counselor.
Right.
And, it was years afterwards that Matt did come and tell us that, he did want to talk to somebody about it, because it was, it was on his mind, and he was thinking about it, and he felt like he needed to talk to somebody. So everybody grieves differently, and that's not unusual. I've talked to other people in our support group who've had their kids come forward after 5-6 years to say, yeah. And we jumped into it immediately, as parents of someone who lost, our son. But I think with siblings and, with people who've lost a parent, it's all different. It's all very different. So you get help, you encourage people to get help, but they will do it in their own time, and they'll grieve in their own time as well.
Okay, so it's important to know that. And everybody's different, and everybody approaches it differently, I would imagine. Mm-hmm. I know that a lot of people sometimes will watch an interview and say, how can I get involved? Or like in this case with AFSP, or how can I learn more about it? How can I volunteer? How can I donate? In order to do any of those, how do they get in contact with you or with AFSP?
Right. Well, our New Jersey chapter's website is afsp.org/New Jersey. So you can go online. You can see all the different activities that are taking place. We still have a couple walks that are taking place, and we've got our Survivor Day events as well. We also have a bunch of educational programs. But also when you go onto that website, you'll see a button that says volunteer. If you click on that button and complete the form, I will be in touch with you. I talk to all of our new volunteers to try to get a sense of how they want to get involved with the organization. We've got a wide variety of ways that people can get involved. You can, support an activity like a walk on the day of the event. You can train to teach programs, educational programs. You can get involved in advocacy. You can get involved in helping our survivors, right? Supporting newly bereaved people. We have a whole loss and healing program where people can get involved with that as well. So there's lots of different ways that people can get involved, but if you go to the afsp.org/New Jersey website, you can volunteer, and then we'll have a conversation and explore those options.
Okay, well, Beth Stapleton, thank you so much for coming on. As a community, we continue to extend our condolences to you and your family, but it's always amazing how much you've done in the short time that you've done it. And we wish you the best, and we wish AFSP the best, and to continue to do good research and to reach, provide the resources that people need to have those very, important, courageous conversations. So if we see somebody out there that it may be suicidal, it's important to have that conversation and to lift the stigma, surrounding, mental health and suicide, because it's important to talk about it and not internalize it.
Absolutely. I think this, stigma is what keeps so many people from getting the help that they need. So by talking about it, I do believe that we're saving lives. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for watching. I'm Lou Goldstein. Thank you for watching our two-part series with Beth Stapleton on suicide prevention and education. We hope to provide more informative and educational shows for you in the future. Until then, stay healthy, stay active, stay engaged, stay productive. And I'll see you next week on another edition of Focus On. Have a good night.
Every day,